Hello folks, as promised we're going to be looking through this week's homework today. This is out of 57 marks and I'd like you to go through it with me, mark up as you go, make any corrections that you think you need to make, and then have a look at the scores next week. There will also be a paper to do after this. So let's start with question 3. We have two games that can be played with dice, which gives a higher chance of scoring 6. So in these sort of questions, you need to show how you've come up with your two different probabilities. You need to obviously compare them in some way, show which is bigger, and then make a final conclusion. So for game A, because we're talking about two dice and adding numbers, I would probably go with a sample space. Or in some other way, you need to indicate there are 36 options of what the score could be, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are the answer 6. We can get that with a 5, 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, etc. So probability for A is 5 out of 36. If you got that, that would be like 3 marks. Probability for B is just 1 out of 6. So sorry, maybe 2 marks for getting your probability for A, maybe 1 mark for getting your probability for B. 1 mark for being able to directly compare them. So I've made them both out of 36, or you could make them both decimals. And then your final mark's going to be for concluding game. B is more likely to have you score 6. Okay. Question 12, another 5 marker, value of the median of the expressions. So we're going to have to assume these are in order because, well, they're getting bigger as we go through. The middle is in between the 2x and the 6x, and that would be 4x is in the middle of those two. So if you have 4x written anywhere, that would be a mark. If you set it equal to 12 and solved it to get 3, that would be 2. Your third mark is going to be for writing out all your numbers in order. Your fourth mark is going to be for doing some sort of calculation here. So for your mean, you add them all up, you divide by how many, and your fifth mark will be for your final answer. The mean of these expressions is 15. Okay. For question 13, there's a lot of ways you can do this. I went for a other method, but trial and improvement is just trying numbers. If it's obvious that you found an answer where 2 of them are the same, that would be 1 mark. If we find the exact answer 3, then that would be your second mark, and your third mark is for actually showing that all 3 of them are the same for this particular value. They're all equal to -3 at this point. Now if you look here, the way I did it was I set up a quadratic. I said that these two had to be the same, so x squared minus 12 was the same as x minus 6. Set one side equal to 0, because that's what you do with quadratics, solved it to get 3 and minus 2, and then just checked which one of those made the other expression the same as well. So 1 mark for getting one of these answers, 1 mark for choosing 3, and 1 mark for saying, well, because they all equal -3. Question 15, first 3 terms of the sequence. If you got any one of these right, that would be a mark. If you got all 3 of them, that would be 2 marks. Let's just square the number and take away 3. For 15b, I kind of did this through a working backwards approach. We've got a term-to-term rule, so this is like how you get to the next one. So we started with a term, we times it by 2, we added 1, we ended up with 8x minus 5. So working backwards, I needed to take away 1 to get to 8x minus 6, and I needed to divide by 2 to get to 4x minus 3. So my first term is 4x minus 3. As far as getting some of the marks, if you tried to do either a take away 1 or a divide by 2 in any order, that would be 1 mark. If you did them both in the correct order, that would be 2. If you got the right answer, 4x minus 3, that would be your third mark. 16, another 5 marker. We're talking about volume now. So the volume of concrete is going to be the whole volume of the cuboid, take away the volume of the cylinder. And if you tried to do that in any way, that would be a mark. The volume of the cuboid is 20 times 90 times 15, that would be a mark. The volume of the cylinder is pi times 4 squared times 90, that would be another 2 marks. And then your final answer along with, oh, not with the units, yeah, your final answer will get your final mark. Okay. 17a, these are circle theorems for question 17. You don't need the reason cyclic quadrilateral, but that is the reason. Opposite sides of a cyclic quadrilateral add up to 180, so x is 56, 1 mark. 17b, 70 degrees because it's an alternate segment. And the alternate segment is basically if you have a triangle balanced on the tangent, then the bottom left is the same as the top right, and also these two would be the same, so the bottom right is the same as the top left. For 17c, again, it doesn't want the reasons, but I'm giving them because it will help to explain. So if you worked out that this angle here was 94, because double angle at the centre compared to the circumference, that would be 1 mark. If you then worked out that this was a right angle here, because radiuses and tangents meet at 90 degrees, that would be 2 marks. Your third mark would be for saying, so this is half of that, because this is actually a kite, and kites are symmetrical down the line, so we can split that 94 in 2. 47 and 90 and 43 for y to make that triangle equal 180. That'd be a third mark. For question 18, 1 mark for each of these. Just sub your values in and get your values out. Remember, if you are doing this with a calculator, you should put brackets around negative numbers when you're squaring and doing things with them. Question 18, this is the graph you should have. 1 mark if you've got 1 point in the wrong place. And then C, the solutions of the equation 2x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So you're asking, when does this graph equal 0? It's at these 2 points here. So 2 is one of your answers. Minus 1.5, you might have either side of that by a little bit, minus 1.4 to minus 1.6, if you drew your graph slightly differently to me. Another probability question. This is a tree diagram question. Simon passing his driving test at 3/5, Kim 4/7. So if you drew a tree diagram, that would be 1 mark. It should be like Simon's pass and then Kim's pass or fail, or you could have done Kim first, I suppose, and then Simon. We want the probability at least one of them passes the driving test, so we want to add up these 3 branches. So if we worked out any of these probabilities, that would be a second mark. If you worked out all 3 and added them up, 29 out of 35, you get a third mark. Strikes me that another way of doing this would be saying, well, the opposite of at least one of them passing would be if both of them failed. So we could work that out instead. So the probability that both fail, it's essentially the bottom branch of this tree diagram, isn't it? It's 2/5 times 3/7, which is 6 out of 35, and then what's left over is 29 out of 35. That's another way you could get there without drawing a tree diagram. For 28, if we put to a power of 4, we multiply the powers by 4, so 12 and 4, and we raise numbers to the power of 4, so 2 to the power of 4 at the front, 16. If you got 2 of these things right, you get a mark. Expanding and simplifying, strikes me I've not quite finished this. The first 2 marks would be for expanding, 1 mark if you got one of these wrong, and then your third mark is going to be for collecting these middle terms together. So we should have minus 11xy in the centre, minus 6y squared. 21, use a quadratic formula, so 3 marks, 1 mark if you set it up correctly, 1 mark if you got one of these answers, 1 mark if you got the other of these answers, both rounded to 2 decimal places. So if you had 0.405, you do not get all 3 marks. 22, I thought of 2 ways we could do this. The first way is by thinking about this as completing the square, and although this was the obvious way that occurred to me, I don't think it would necessarily be the obvious way for you. I completed the square with x squared minus 12x. I figured out that this was basically x minus 6 all squared, and then minus 36 plus a, of which there's nothing over here, so that had to equal 0, so a had to be 36 to make that happen, and c was 6 because it was in the same place in the bracket. And that's one way you can do it, so you get 1 mark for setting up an equation, 1 mark for finding a, 1 mark for finding c. Or maybe the way that might appeal more to you is expand the right hand side and compare stuff directly. So we've got x squared on the left, x squared on the right. We've got 12x in the left and 2c x on the right. So that tells you 2c is 12 and c is 6. And on the left we've got a, and on the right we've got c squared. We know c is 6, so a is 6 squared is 36. I think that's probably the way most of you will have gone for. 1 mark for coming up with this, 1 mark for finding c, 1 mark for finding a. Simplifying fractions, you want to factorise everything first. So if we've made good attempts to factorise the top and the bottom, that would be 1 mark. If we've factorised the top and the bottom correctly, that would be 2 marks. If you then cancelled out the x plus 4s that they have in common to get this, that would be your third mark. I've actually shown a multiply add multiply method of factorising the top here. You don't need this to get the marks, you can sometimes just work out. That's what it looks like, but this is how it works. We need the numbers that multiply to minus 60, added to 17, 20 and minus 3, split the middle, factorise each half, put them together. Okay, last question. So this is a bounds question, and 5 marks again. Generally speaking, we're going to get 2 marks for, well, 1 mark for each of these ranges. So if the maximum safe load of a bridge is 1500 to the nearest 10, what you do with to the nearest is halve it to get 5, add it on, take it away, HAT. So we're going to go from 1495 to 1505. If you have either of those numbers for the bridge, you get a mark. If you have either of these numbers for the soldier, you get a mark, so that's 1 kilogram divided by 2 is a half, add, take away. And then for the maximum number of soldiers that can safely cross the bridge, so your third mark will be for doing a division of one of these values by one of these values, as in one of the top numbers by one of the bottom numbers. Your fourth mark would be for picking the right ones, okay? So what we're trying to say here is if the bridge was like the worst it could have possibly be, if it was like the least safe bridge, the 1495 kilo bridge, and the soldiers were as heavy as possible, were 75.5, how many could you still safely get on that bridge? So if you'd chosen 1495 and 75.5 and got 19.8, that would be your fourth mark. But obviously in many militaries it's not legal to march 0.8 of a soldier across a bridge, so you'd have to round down to 19 soldiers. We couldn't round it up to 20 because then it wouldn't be safe. So fifth mark for the rounding down. Okay. Hope that helped. Give yourself a mark out of 57. As far as general grade boundaries go, I would say, let me just do a little quick calculation here, that you'd be looking at something like 50 marks for the grade 9. You'd be looking at maybe, what shall we go with? Maybe 43 marks for the grade 8, and then maybe about 35 marks for the grade 7, and then just to say for grade 6 we would want in the region of 26 marks. Below that I think you have to do some serious repair work. Okay, cheers folks, I'll see you next week. Ta-ra.